dive into and understand what is constitution as such. So first of all, constitution is a type is a body. It's a document. It's a basically a document which consists of rules, regulation, or we can call it as a rule book, which is necessary for any proper functioning because there are too many institutions and too many factors to consider in. For that purpose, it's better to have a book of document or book of provisions which will help understand the public or the governing bodies to follow certain set of procedures. So this could be either in an organized format or in an unorganized format, or this could be written or unwritten, which keeps changing as per the need of the society or as per the need of the times. So if we talk about the basic principle, what is constitution, then it is called as a basic set of body which consists of principles and provisions which are adjusted according to the need and the purpose between the governing powers and the governments and the rights of the governed. So, who are these rights of the governments between the people, between the citizens, between the parties, and between the governments or the executive that has been formed? So, that is a basic definition of constitution or a text of document that we can call. So, this now the question comes: is this text available to everybody else in the world democracy or the everybody else in the aristocratic institutions? So basically, the constitution can be seen in the form where there's a democratically elected government exists. Because in that case only there comes a situation or an issue of whether my rights have been addressed or not. In an aristocratic or in an totalitarian government which is formed, there people have no voice at all. So why would they need a document as such? So that is how the constitution or this basic legal document is necessary or the main criteria for a democratically elected state. And it is also, it has various names. So what are its various names? It can be called as a legal document, rules of state, instrument of government, fundamental law of the land, basic structure of the polity, or the cornerstone of the nation state system. So these are all the different names that the constitution, the document, so-called constitution could be addressed as. So now what is this constitution called? Again, if you revise, it is a principle of body of provisions which are adjusted between the powers of the government and the rights of the governed. And it is also known as legal document, rules of state, instrument of government, fundamental law of the land, and basic structure of the polity, and cornerstone of any nation state system. So this other names of the constitution itself help us understand that how important or how well versed it has to be for a nation to have a document as such in hand. Now let us understand the various definitions or the examples given by the political analyst. So according to Casey Ware, he says the constitution is used in two instances. So there is a single, not just a single purpose of the constitution that is formed, not just for the rules of the governed or the rules of the government. It is based on the system of government, rules and regulation which govern and establish the government. And it is also a non-legal procedures which are done through conventions and customs. So this constitution can be amended or it can be used both in official and non-official ways. So what is this official ways? This is done through a systematic procedure. This is done through basic rules and regulations, which are necessary for us to have an established government or which are necessary for a citizen to enshrine their fundamental rights or to help them understand or protect their fundamental rights, which are enshrined in the constitution. And also the non-legal way, which is done when there is no government in power. Example, the ordinances or the executive decrees. I hope you all know what are ordinances are. Ordinances are passed by the president when there is no session of parliament. Okay, when there is no parliament in session and the act or a bill has to be necessarily addressing the important events, then president has authority to pass an executive decree. So which is an ordinance. So this ordinance can be made, this is valid for 6 months or so. So after that, when the next session comes into power or comes into existence or when the next session prorogues, then the ordinance which has been passed by the president then shall be uh, subjected for the discussions in the house and it must be passed as an bill or an act. So then only it will be valid. Otherwise, it ceases to exist. So this constitution is constantly evolving and changes. So now how can we understand? Constitution is fixed. Okay, fixed as in just in a synonymical manner, it's just fixed. But this can be amended. This can be amended through statutes, decrees, judicial review, custom and usages. So this can be done legal way or both the non-legal way. So how these amendments are done or how these statutes can affect the structure of the constitution, how the usage or the how the public opinion matters in framing a constitution or amending it as per the situations. So now what are these amendments? Amendments are done as per the needs and the procedure laid down in the constitution. So Article 368 lays down the procedure for the government to amend any part of the constitution itself. So there has been many cases around the Article 368. Then the Keshavananda Bharati case established that the Constitution shall maintain the basic structure intact and can the government can amend the other parts of it. So amendments are done to the Constitution as per the needs and the procedure laid down in the Constitution. Now, amendment made for the inclusion of reservation of women in 70 through 73rd and 74 Constitutional Amendment Acts. So these are the basic amendments. This is like one or second amendment. Then there is one or third amendment, one or second amendment, and one or fifth amendment, which are recent in times, which included EWS, which included a new commission called OBC, then reservation for women has been pushed. So all such things are amendments. So what are these amendments? These are basic procedures done or basic necessary changes done to the constitution, which are necessary for changing times. Okay, so this changing times, how do we understand that there are necessary changing times? Suppose women reservation bill. Earlier, the participation of women was not addressed as such. But with changing political structure or with women occupying almost 50% of the population, there is a need for addressing the women issues through women representatives. So, and also in such a way, we can increase uh, the the position or their membership in the house. So and all so those things are called amendments. They are done in a procedural manner. They cannot be done as such. So these amendments are like three types: simple, through simple majority, through majority of two-third present and voting, through majority present and voting. So this can be done as such, and ratification by one-third of the states. So there are three types of amendments. Now, next one is statutes. So the statutes are nothing but legislative of the state is changed as per the need and the time. And rules and provisions are changed. So in statutes, the issues which address the basic structure of the constitution or anything as such cannot be forced to be changed. But the things which are necessary for the time and the need, they can be done through basic the government statutes, which may not disrupt the basic structure or the fundamental rights of the citizen. Example, Sexual Harassment of a Woman and Prevention, Prohibition and Reprisal Act 2013. So earlier there was no act addressing the sexual harassment of women at a workplace. This has been done through Vishaka guidelines, which was done by the Supreme Court, which gave certain guidelines necessary for addressing the workplace harassment for the women. So what happened here, as there was no act as such in the constitution or no decree or no stature by the government, the court has come up with certain guidelines. So these guidelines must be followed until a regular act which addresses such issues shall be made. So till this act was made in 2013, we have been following Vishaka's guidelines. So this Vishaka guidelines addresses how a workplace harassment can be addressed, how it can be tackled. So this is a procedure laid down by the court. Same thing happened with the environmental law also. There was no environmental act earlier, but it was through the Supreme Court's order. It was through Supreme Court guidelines until the act was made by the government. So these guidelines were followed. So these are called statutes. These statutes could be replaced by an original act that can be passed by the House through the amendment procedure. And next one is executive decrees. So executive decrees is done by the head of the state to make changes to the constitution. So what are these executive decrees? So example, ordinances. Ordinances by the president, ordinances by the governor. So these are called the executive decrees. And these are temporary in nature. So why are this temporary in nature? These executive decrees are passed only during certain time when the session will not be prorogued or will not be in uh, meeting for that session. We'll have winter session, monsoon session, right? When winter session and monsoon session happen, there's a gap in between. When the house is not addressing any issues, or when house is not holding up the meetings, or when house is not in session, then the governor or the president, if they think that this is necessary and this shall be addressed in the public interest, then they can issue ordinances. But these are temporary in nature. This must be passed through the official procedures when the session comes into existence. Okay, when parliamentary or monsoon sessions ఎప్పుడైతే the time they'll have meet again, then they can sit down to pass such ordinances to be making an original act. Otherwise, they seem to exist. Next one is judicial review. So in the previous lectures, we have read that judicial review is very important, and Marbury versus Madison case, which gave the existence of or which gave rise to a concept of judicial review as such in American history, which has been adopted in India. And this judicial review is a basic document, basic structure of the Constitution. So earlier we have read through 42nd Constitutional Amendment or the ninth Schedule Amendment. This judicial review concept itself has been removed, but it was replaced or adjusted through 44th Amendment Act. And judicial review, court can also amend the laws under the power of judicial review. How? Because the court, the basic courts are the guardians of the Constitution. Okay, they are there to safeguard the constitutional document. They are there to protect and preserve the fundamental rights of any citizen. So once court seemed that the law, the executive order, or any ordinance or any amendments that has been made by the government against against the basic structure of so-called government, which has been implied through Kesavananda Bharati case. So if the court thinks that the provisions or the adjustments made by the government to the constitution or amendments made to the constitution are against the constitutional provisions, they violate the basic structure of the constitution, then court have this power. Court can judicially review that case, and it can declare any act or any bill or any decree ultra vires and make it void if they think that they are against the provisions that has been provided by the constitution. So that is the concept of judicial review, and judicial review is also one of the adjustment. Example, there are suppose 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, 44th Constitutional Amendment Act. So that is why 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act is also called mini constitution. So because various changes have been made, and the court has replaced those things because the very notion of the elections of 5 years have been increased to 6 years, and the very concept of judicial review has been removed through by amending Article 368 itself, which was done through the emergency period in a hurry. So court has followed it up and had arguments and said that this is against the spirit of the constitution. These provisions are against the constitution. So this has to be declared void. So this is how the judicial review also plays a part in changing the structure of the constitution once it thinks that the provisions made are against the spirit of the Constitution. Now, the custom and practices is another most important thing. This custom and practices, as said by J.S. Mill, so he says that these are designated as unwritten maxims of the Constitution. How? Because the custom and constitution, how did we adapt it to parliamentary system of government? We could have gone for presidential system also, but we went for parliamentary system because we had this custom and practice of colonial rule following up in a parliamentary system of provinces and the autonomous states, etc., the center and the state. So this structure had made us familiar with this parliamentary system of government. So with people's opinions, with people's customs and people's viewpoints, can also amend the constitution. Okay, example in British constitution also, the constitution is unwritten, it's flexible, and it can be amended as per the need and the emergency of the situation that arises. So it can be changed to customs and practices. Example, until 1967, we have one nation, one elections. Right. But it was through 1967, and there has been hung governments, there has been unstable governments forming with the regional parties coming into power. We have slightly adopted, or we can say it has emerged over a time with the practices that has been going on in the states through like not one state, one nation, one election concept. We have slightly moved on to the session or the differences until the 5 years of the house or the in the state that succeeds. So, but now recently the government has set up a committee under ex-president Ramnath Kovind to look into the implications of one nation, one state. So again, they are thinking, the committee were thinking to go back to one nation, one election. And the recent go signal, the green signal has also been given that it is feasible and it should be considered for such as such. But the custom and practice was feasible before 1967 because there were no regional parties, and the parties existing were like hardly the Congress was predominant and it's a majority party. But if we consider that in today's times with regional voices and state level parties coming into picture, the one nation, one state would seem to advantage the national parties or parties which are popular in two or more states. So this customs and practices will also be considered while amending or while changing the legal document. Now, next one, there are types of constitutions. So the types of constitution, how can a classification be made? So this is a basic question that you have to understand. So the classification is considered on the basis of concentration of power versus distribution of power. So this classification also been done through the previous chapter, where the rigid and flexibility of the constitution or the parliamentary and the presidential system of government that has been divided. Same thing, basis on concentration of power versus distribution of power. Example, there are four types of constitutions: written, unwritten, rigid, and flexible constitutions. So, and also these are considered through various notions. So, first case could be addressed as evolved and enacted constitution. So, evolved and enacted constitution is this constitution is a deliberative act. So this constitution is a deliberative act and the creation of the state. They wantedly, deliberately created such provisions. It has been understood or studied over a period and enacted and evolved over a certain set of times and made as per the need of the times. And the laws and documents are scattered because it keeps on evolving, it keeps on enacting, and it also a deliberative act of the state. We cannot have a certain set of documents, fixed documents. So these are scattered everywhere, and the particular government that comes into power will select those few of the acts and govern as per its need. Now, example, classic example is Britain because constitutional document doesn't exist. It's an unwritten and flexible constitution. Uh, see, unwritten doesn't mean there is no document at all. There are documents. There are documents, there are acts, there are every provisions, but just they are scattered. They are not as such fixed like what Indian constitution is. As a book of documents, right? They don't have such books. They have already free existing laws here, there, somewhere. If they wish to go by that route, then the government which comes into power can impart that. So example is Britain, then evolved and cumulative constitution. So it's partly evolved through amendments, through the basic decrees, judicial review, etc. And it's also cumulative. It also looks into the customs and the people's opinions into picture. Then acts are made through common law and court judgment. So here the judicial review comes into picture. And common law, what is common law? The constitutional already existing decree. And also it looks into whether the provisions which have been made do not violate the fundamental rights of the citizens. So all such things will be considered. The next one is enacted, and the last one is evolved. So enacted means constitutional conventions are summoned by the head of the state. So these enactments are made by the head of the states after passing the through either through formal amendments or either through ordinances or either through the statutes. So this is done by the head of the state. The next one is evolved. Changes are in response to aspirations and the urges of the public. So this uh, example, the public play a crucial role in asking the government to amend such any bills or an outcry that has been against the general public opinion, and it has been in favor of the state governments, or sorry, in favor of the governments that are either at the state or the central. Example, changes are in response to aspirations. I mean, if people think that there is a need, then the government may think to introduce that bill in the house for the formal discussion. Now, let us talk about unwritten constitution. So, what is this unwritten constitution? Outcome of legal laws. It's an outcome of legal laws, court judgments, statutes, customs with the growth of legal and political decisions. So, this unwritten constitution is nothing but this. There's a document definitely, but this document is an outcome of any legal law that has been existing, court judgments to the series of the legal laws or the government decrees, then statutes and the customs with the legal and political decisions as such. So here everybody plays a role like the government in power, political parties, public, and also courts, and also already existing customs and practices. And it's not deliberately made by this state polity, but this has been existing as such. This could be used by the government that comes into power. So this could not be used by the government that comes into power. Or this could be made according to the people's outcry. And also, this is not deliberative act. Now let us talk about the merits of the unwritten constitution. So what are the merits, which is easy? So it's easily adaptable because it's unwritten. The documents are scattered everywhere. I can wish to address that document. If I form a government, I can either wish to address that document, or I cannot. I can look for other alternative. So as there is no book as such, I can go as per the document that has been floating around, and which I think is necessary, or which I think is available for me to understand. And it prevents any uprisings and natural outgrowth. Why? Because it's not fixed. It's not rigid. It can be easily adaptable according to the people's pulse or people's opinion. And if people think that there's an outcry for such any bill that has been introduced, and they think that it violates their fundamental rights, or it against the spirit of the nation, so then it can prevent any uprisings, as it is not fixed as such. It can be changed at any point of time. And see, the one which forms a merit is also a demerit. So now the another demerit is it leads to instability. Why? Because suppose I form a government and my party is different, and somebody else will form a government next term and their party agenda is different. Now what happens? As it is unwritten, I can deliberately change it to my wishes and to my interests of the party, because I can take the opinions from the floating documents, as it is not fixed. I need not follow the single procedure. So this may lead to uncertainty. This may also lead to instability. Suppose I make some law and which is against the spirit of the constitution or anything, and there has been outcry, or suppose my cabinet doesn't accept by it, they may call for no confidence motion. So this may lead to instability, and it will also create confusion and controversies. Why? Because one government will come into power, they'll follow some procedures, and the other one will come into power, they follow the other procedures. And also there might be the confusion in the government itself that is formed, because what to follow, because there is no certain set of rules. Although there are set of rules, but they are not fixed as such. So it might lead to confusion, and it might create controversies. because some may go at extremities in making any law. Now, this example of such thing is found in aristocratic and monarchical state. The classic example is British monarchical. So they don't have a written document, and monarchical because the monarch is the head of the state. So the bills or anything are made on their name. Although they seem to be like the rubber stamp or something, but they are eventually the head of the state. And unwritten doesn't mean, yeah, that's what I told in the previous slides. Unwritten doesn't mean that it's not on paper, but rather a detailed document doesn't exist. A detailed document like ours, like India has a procedure laid down for everything. Uh, Suppose the amendments, what all amendments could be considered as simple amendments, or what amendments could be considered as simple with majority present and voting, the other one with simple with majority present and voting, and one third ratification of the state. So that procedure doesn't exist in British. So it's rather not detailed, but the document definitely exists. Now, next one is written constitution. So the written constitution could be, the provisions are embodied in a single document. So the another such example is India. India has the written constitution, and also USA, they have a certain set of documents. So because as there is a written structure, the structure are made through series of discussions, series of amendments, and it is a conscious organization. It's consciously created through organized structure, organized decisions. And who has this written constitution? Definitely the democracies only have such written constitution. So the written constitution is nothing but there exists a book of rules ఉంటాయి. ఆ rules we have to follow. If we doesn't seem to have followed that rules, then the courts can come in. Court, courts వచ్చి judicial review ద్వారా they can say that this is against the provisions which are mentioned in that book. So this act cannot be considered. So there's checks and balances method also. So that is what the benefit of written constitution. ఒక book ఉంది అంటే, suppose for any institution, for anything, there is certain disciplinary procedure or rules book. Suppose even for a college, you have to follow such certain timings. Uh, if you don't seem to follow certain timing, then you won't be allowed to enter the college itself. So there are certain rules written, necessary provisions in the document, which can make the proper functioning, which can make the job of government very easy. But also there are demerits to it. So we'll read demerits also. Example, the merits are, it is stable in nature. Why? Because the governments coming into power, different governments coming into power or forming a government, they need not go by their wishes. They have to follow the certain rules which are already existing. So they have to act by those certain rules. And also that's why it's stable in nature. I cannot influence my opinions, or I cannot influence the policies through my agenda of my party or the manifesto that my party exhibits. Because there are certain rules. My party has to follow those rules. So that is why it is stable in nature, and it gives clarity and detailed provisions of the rights of the people. So the whole concept of constitution is to protect the rights of the people, to rights of the citizen. So that is the main purpose of the constitution itself. Okay, so it gives clarity because it's already written in detail and it's a deliberative act. So, and also the provisions are mentioned. What would happen if you don't follow the provisions, or what are the provisions which are necessary for the protection of the rights of the people. So that is why it gives a clarity and detailed provisions on the rights of the people. Then, of course, certainly there exists demerits also. The demerits are fixed laws will lead to conservatism. This is the necessary understanding. They say that the fixed laws could lead to the changing times. The people would call for an uprising, or would call for would say that the law that has been made against their spirit. with evolving the times, they think that this has to be considered as such. But the fixed laws will lead to conservatism, as the changing times could not be considered by the government to make any law. So the conservatism concept comes in here, and it will lead to different interpretations by the different courts. This has happened in, suppose the example basic structure itself, then Golaknath case, then the Keshavananda Bharati case, then Minerva Mills case, then A.K. Gopalan case. So these all things, then again it was established by Minerva Mills case. So initially the 1950, the Act 1950 court judgment said that the government are free to amend any laws. The government are free to amend any part of the constitution. They can amend, they can even disrupt the fundamental rights of the people. So initially the court judgment said that, then it was also established by 1970 case. Then later the Keshavananda Bharati case comes into picture and establishes or cancels out the previous court judgment, saying the government cannot amend the constitution, and also they cannot amend the procedure of the amending the constitution through Article 368. And also this has been established through various other following up cases, where Minerva Mills case, where if an discrepancies between fundamental rights and DPS space, then fundamental rights has to be followed. So all such things are being interpreted by different courts. Example, anti-defection law. Anti-defection law in 1995, which was made, it was been interpreted differently by different courts, by different governments, by different speaker of the houses. So until in 1991, it was Kyoto Cologne versus it was until Kyoto Cologne case 1991, the constitutional bench was formed, and the court gave certain guidelines, or it interpreted the anti-defection law of 1985, or the 10th schedule. So it interpreted and gave certain rules and regulations, that this is how the law has to be read, which has been generally made by the government. And also there's a scope for what can we call fiction. There's a scope for judicial fiction. So understanding that judicial fiction, we have made or interpreted such laws. So tomorrow some other court will come. So already existing, there has been a second bench of constitutional bench formed on the to study the anti-defection law, which has been made by through the Shiv Sena case. So the second bench is yet to read that law. So the judgments could change. So every court will come, every constitutional bench will come. They'll interpret differently. This might lead to different court cases. Okay, because it all depends on the voting of the bench that forms in. So this might also lead to uncertainty. Now, next one is the flexible government constitution. Now, what is flexible constitution? It's in the name itself. It's easily amendable. So this flexible constitution is easily amendable, and example, written constitution. And in order to amend the constitution, no special procedure is required. So they can simply pass it through simple majority, but it will not necessarily be done in India, because ours is partly flexible and partly rigid. And bill must be passed by both houses by simple majority. And the merits of flexible government is it is easily adaptable, yes, during national and international crisis, because they wanted to pass a single law that could be followed by the states. Then states ratification is not necessarily important. So here they can pass the decree, or they can pass the amendment, change the amendment, or amend the amendment through simple majority, and they can follow a uniform law all over their nation. Now, demerits is politicians may take advantage in changing the laws. So this is one of the basic demerit that has to be considered. See, overpowering any human being, overpowering any institution will lead to crisis, will lead to political crisis, right? The political structure will collapse. So this must be considered or taken into consideration. And also, in general, issue with the people is most of them lack political education. Most of them have no idea about how the institutions can work better, what are their rights itself. So how most of them cannot read the document itself. Right. So with this all discrepancies, with lack of knowledge, it will lead to possible selfish activities or selfish policies made by the any party. Now, next one is rigid constitution. So now what is this rigid constitution? A special procedure has to be followed in order to amend the constitution. Yes, because it's rigid. It cannot be easily amended as such the previous flexible constitution. It requires, definitely requires two-thirds of majority present and voting. Because, and also rigid constitutions will give distinctions between what is a constitutional amendment, what is a normal amendment. So in India also, we have constitutional amendment and normal amendments. So the constitutional amendments need two-third and it has to be introduced by the president. It should be two-third present and voting. Also, we have simple amendments, which shall be followed by simple majority present and voting. Okay. So the rigid constitutions will definitely have rules and sets of rules which are necessary to amend such constitution. Article 368 in our case, which laid down the procedure for the amendment procedure in the constitution. And according to Garner, he says constitutional laws are always above the ordinary laws because it's a constitutional law itself. It's a basic it's a basic feature that is necessary for the proper functioning of the democratic structure. And merits of the rigid constitution, it's definitely permanent in nature. It has to be amended. Then it has to follow certain set of rules. It cannot be easily amended with 2 or 3 persons coming and giving a decree. And also, it's definitely safe from legislative orders, legislative documents. So legislative is not cannot simply tomorrow amend the constitution. So they have to follow certain set of procedures. Then only it can be considered as an amendment to the constitution. And it is not easily amendable. Yes, it requires majorities. It requires certain sort of majority to achieve or change that document or make changes to the document. And the rigid constitution, another important thing is it protects the rights and the liberties of the people. How? Because for in order to change anything, they required the they require the certain set of criteria to be fulfilled to change the document, right? So in a way, it's basically protecting the rights of the people. So that is what the constitution is for, right? So the document certainly exists for the protection of people itself. Now, what purpose does it serve if it doesn't protect any people? It can be easily amendable and it does not have any restrictions put on the legislature. So legislature can abuse the power. Overpowering any institution is will lead to destability, will lead to aristocracy. Okay, will lead to power coming into hands of only certain group of people. Right. Now, the demerits of the constitution is again it's conservative in nature as it is fixed. Yes, we have to go by the merits mostly, and it leads to frequent revolts. Yes, again true because it's fixed. You cannot change it easily. So, in order to change according to the public pulse or the public outcry, the public will definitely will come on streets and fight for it, and it will lead to revolts. Example, when the government introduced the Farmers Bill or CAA, there has been a lot of public outcry, right? So because they think that it has to be, it is conservative in nature and it violated their basic fundamental rights. So they have come in public outcry and did uh, revolt against the act that has been made by the government, and judicial supremacy and constitution become lawyers paradise. So now example, if strictly speaking, if we talk about it, how many of you can read perfectly the constitution, or how many of you can read and understand the articles, the language, the wordings? It's basically it's made by the lawyers. So most of the constitutional fathers of the drafting committee, they most of them are lawyers, so they understand. They definitely made the document as per the wordings. So it's very uncommon for a common public to understand such words. So for us to understand those things, the constitution supremacy. It will lead to courts interpreting too much about the constitutional laws, or the constitution will become a leader's paradise, sorry, lawyer's paradise. See, if the fundamental rights or any article, or being a citizen of India, you have to understand what are your rights. This is basic, necessary condition. You must read to understand. But how can you read if the document as such is not easily understandable to majority of the public? So the rigid constitutions are as such, then that's why it's called law as paradise. Then now if we analyze the rigid constitution and the flexible constitution, so this rigidity and flexibility depends on the character and temperament of the people. Example can be given from USA. USA is a rigid constitution, but it has been changed many times. Yes, with even with judicial review, or even with the executive power, super power of the executive. So it's either a decree or an executive order or judicial decision that will play an important role in the changing the constitution as such. Now the flexible constitution is better any day, yes, than the rigid one, because flexibility, although it's flexible, doesn't mean that they are flexible to change or amend the laws as such. There are certain pre-notion or provisions which will keep tab on the constitution, uh, because the constitutional maker have put a tab. So even it's flexible or rigid, flexible could be considered because it can change according to the times or the emergency of the needs, and it can be amended as per the temperament of the people. So what purpose does a rigid serve if it doesn't serve the people itself? Right. So that is why flexible constitution can be is better any day over the rigid one. And also, it suppose if the constitution itself is against the basic concept for the protection of the people, then it might the government might collapse. People might lose confidence in the government. So for that purpose, the flexibility has to be there. But also the flexibility comes with certain rules and regulations. And also it is very helpful during emergencies. So if there's an emergency all over India, then single act could be used, or single amendment could be used to hold the nation together. So these are all the positive merits and demerits of rigid constitution, flexible constitution, written constitution, and unwritten constitution. The next one is constitutionalism. So constitutionalism is what? Constitutionalism means supremacy of the law. It does not talk about the institutional head or head of the state. It talks about the document is the supreme. So document will have supremacy of the law. And what is this constitutionalism has? It is a body of rules which ensures fair play of the citizen. So that is what the basic purpose of the constitution is. And also it's an instrument of the government or the fundamental law of the land. Yes. So this line is very important. So what it is? It's an instrument of government which helps the government for the smooth functioning and the protection of the rights of the citizens. And also it's basically the fundamental law of the land for that land to exist. And the constitutional government is descriptive of two different poles. Okay, it limits the powers of the government, and also it helps the government to control the provisions. So in only democratic country, constitution is said to have existed. So this constitution is said to have existed. So as per this, constitutionalism is not something that is new. This constitutionalism is of a Greek society, is of old existence. So according to Aristotle, he says the polity is the best state. And also this constitutionalism existed during the Greek city-state system. And as we know, the study of constitution, or Aristotle has come across like 158 or 166 constitution. The comparative studies have begun with the studies of Aristotle's study of constitution itself, and he came up to the concept of polity as a single best state. Then during Middle Ages, it is an absolute authority of the king over the authority of the religion. So this was also a constitutional document degree. And also during 18th century, it is identified with democratic government and new features. And also in India, Article 51, we say DPSPs says about commitment to observation of international law, promotion, international peace, and security. Now, let us talk about features of the Constitution. So what are the basic features of the constitution? It means that every state must be governed by the constitution. So yes, that is why the democratic states exist, and that is the procedure the states must follow. They cannot say that we don't follow the constitution. If suppose any state is not working as per the constitutional machinery, then that state said to have lost its confidence. Then only the president rule will come. Governor will write letter to the central government saying the constitutional machinery of the state has failed to work as per the constitutional structure. So please take over this the state or something. So that is where the president rule comes into picture. Then it has three essential attributes: nationalism, secularism, and democracy. So these three things will keep any nation together, which or these three things will help any nation function properly. And it has adapted the ideals of internationalism also. Internationalism has been our part, Article 51 DPSP, and it must ensure the ideals of social economic welfare of the people in order to ensure political, economic, and social order. So this has to consider all the socio-economic and welfare procedures for a proper functioning of society, and also the secular features for prevailing as per the prevailing conditions. So these are all important features of the constitutionalism. Now, next one is this constitutionalism will be studied in liberal view and the Marxist view. Now, there are two perspectives of studying the constitutionalism. So, first view is liberal view. So, what is liberal view? Liberal view, it's in itself, it's like it's a laws, rights, justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. This all must be considered because they are basic fundamental law of the land. And these rules and provisions are either could be written or unwritten. Here there is no concept of this shall be written only, this shall be unwritten as these are not unwritten, as these are not written, this cannot be followed. No, this doesn't part as a basic concept of the constitutionalism. So these rules and procedures could be written and unwritten. So it also, liberal view also considers both means and ends. So it does not follow the or focus on the ends. It also follows the path that has been followed to reach that end, and it's value based, it's value led. So it means the liberal views, the constitutional view, liberalist view of constitutionalism is it 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 is both means and end, it's value free and it's value laden. And these rules need not necessarily be written and unwritten. So this has to be followed no matter what the fundamental law of the land says. And the scope of government is limited because with 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 already pre-notioned body of documents, with already pre-notioned provisions, the the scope is limited because there is no free will of the government to act as such. So the government, although it's limited, but the provisions and the sets are already mentioned in the document. Now it promotes international peace, security, and justice. So this has been the part or the basic notion of the constitution as such of any countries. So the main aim is to promote international peace and prosperity. And press and media is considered as a fourth estate which seeks to protect the interests of the people. So the role of media is very important. So this is how the public outcry could reach to the government or government procedures or government acts that could reach the public. So they act as a mediator, and also they are there to protect the interests of the people. But initially they are there to protect the interests of the people. But over a period of time, the independent ship or independent media's existence has been slowly, drastically disappearing. They have been they have been pairing their part with the governments that come into power or the opposition that exists. So the I say the media should maintain its independence for protecting the interests of the people because they have been established on the basic their basic fundamental concept is as such to protect the interests of the people. Now, the Marxist view of constitutionalism. So, the Marxist view of constitutionalism is constitution. The Marxist view, constitution is not an end in itself. Liberalist view, it's an end in itself because it limits, and also the government powers are limited. So, it is a tool of dictatorship of proletariat. who seeks to establish a classless society. So they comes into the concept, in order to establish a classless society, the constitution does not have to be an end in itself. It's just a tool of proletariat class. And also, the constitutionalism does not limit the power of the government because it is not an end in itself. And also, power rests with the members of the Communist Party or powers of the party who are the custodian of the law. So government or the constitution itself is not the custodian of the law, any Supreme Court, but the members or the people itself are the custodian of the law. So it also does not limit the power. It's like sky is the limit, although it has been controlled by the proletariat class. Now the problems of constitutionalism is uh, due to the rise of totalitarianism and emergence of warlike situations, the socio-economic distress of the people, this constitutionalism might lead to totalitarianism. And also, it might create the notion of emergency situations like war, or it might create the conditions of the famine or the socioeconomic. It causes socioeconomic distress on the people for their proper livelihood, which in turn will affect their fundamental rights, which is the document is there itself, or the constitutionalism exists for the sake of protection of the people. Instead of protecting it, it will ulta cause distress on the people. So these are certain limits or the problems with the true or the hard notion of the constitutionalism. So now this is the constitution and constitution itself for today. So now let us understand the important questions that might come from it. So now what are these important questions? The first one could be, as we have read, you can introduce what is constitution. So write an example. So first write definition of constitution. So you can write the definition of the constitution. Then you can go with various its names, nomenclature. Then you can go with the one or two statements how the constitution could be evolved, like amendments, statutes, decree. Just mention in one pointer, or also you can go for a flow chart that would also grab the eyes of ex uh, the the evaluator. Then give examples of what is amendment, what is decree, what is customs and practices. Now you can go for the classification. So you can again, you can go for the basic chat. You can go for types of constitution. Then second, first classification will be basis on power, concentration of power. Then second, other classification would be distribution of power. You can go for rigid, unwritten, flexible and rigid. Sorry, written, unwritten, flexible and rigid. Then you can go as case studies. Case 1 evolved and enacted. Case 2 evolved and cumulative. Case 3 enacted. Case 4 evolved. So 4 cases. You can also skip these things. But if you want to make it in a one page, one liner, it lets the evaluator know that you know the theory behind the unwritten and written also. Then you can go for then written constitution, explain what it is, example, then give merits and demerits of the written unwritten constitution. Then you can similarly go for written constitution, define what it is, examples, then explain how in India it is written, what is our document. Then you can go for merits, explain its demerits. And also, if we are only question is about written and unwritten, and conclude the answer saying the any day the written or unwritten, if the unwritten and unwritten in the extremities would not work, there has to be a compatibility between the both, and the state shall be easily adapting to both written and unwritten as such. Now, next one is flexible constitution. Define what it is, write merits, then define examples, then demerits. Then next comes rigid constitution, define what it is, merits and demerits. Now analyze between flexible and rigid constitution. So here also give examples of USA and Britain, and also give an example of India also. And now if there's a question of constitutionalism, write meaning of constitutionalism, what it is, then features of how it has been existing during the old and Greek state system, or during the Middle Ages, or during the 18th century, and how it is in India. Then features of the constitutionalism. Then also you can go explain liberalist view of constitutionalism and Marxist view of constitutionalism. You can conclude as such problems or criticisms. So this is how you can approach. So here I have said three questions. Written, unwritten could be one question. Flexible, rigid would be one question, and in constitutionalism could be a third question. So the total in this 20 slides, we have read about all the three topics and also various other in between discussions. So if you still got any doubts, you can drop. Otherwise, I'll end the session. So, okay. So it seemed to be like no questions, and I hope I'm clear. See you in next class.